Hello, I'm Aaron from DataStax, and today I'm going to take you through backups and restores with HCD on mission control. Let's go. A lot of the backup and restore process is dependent on the underlying storage and how it is configured. In my case, I am using Google Cloud, so there are some things that I'm going to need in place before we can continue. First of all, I'm going to need a cloud storage bucket. And I have created one here called Aaron's Backups. This is where I'm going to have my backup data stored. Now, for this to work with Google's cloud platform, I'm going to need to have a service account. And my service account is just called Aaron's_SA, pretty simple. And I've given it the description of service account for Aaron's clusters in mission control. One thing to note is that when you define your backup configuration inside of mission control, you're going to need your service account JSON. What that is referring to is when you create a new key. So if I say add key, create new key, I'm going to want to click JSON and then create. That's going to give me a JSON payload that I will need to store off so that I can copy and paste that into my backup configuration. But we'll get to that in a second. Now, if I go back to my cloud bucket and on the permissions tab, I need to make sure that my Aaron's SA service account has the ability to persist and read objects from this bucket. And as you can see, my Aaron's SA service account is indeed right there. Okay, I'm going to sign in to Mission Control. So the cluster we're going to look at today is called Test for Echo. And I can click into that and you can see that we have 3 nodes all running on HCD 1.0.0. One thing that we're going to need to do is when you're looking at mission control here, we're going to need to go into this settings option here in the left nav. So let's go ahead and click on that. And then there's one option in here and it's for backup configuration. So let's click on that as well. And you can see that I have one here. It's called Aaron's Backups. Storage provider is Google Storage. Bucket name is Aaron's-Backups. It's the same. And you'll notice that I also specify the region as well of US-Central 1. Simple enough. However, if I modify this configuration, you can see how this is all set. When you create a new backup configuration, you will actually see this window and be able to specify these options as well. Now, again, these options are going to be largely dependent on what your underlying bucket storage looks like. So whether it's, Google in my case, or AWS or Azure, that's going to change how you specify things here. For me specifically, for Google, I don't need to mess with the host or the port. But what I do need to do is go into this service account JSON, and right here is where I need to paste that JSON that I copied when I added my new key for my service account. So make sure that goes in here. Now, I'm not going to mess with this because I know for a fact this works, but this is where that service account JSON should go. So what we're going to do is take that backup configuration that we've created, and we're going to apply it to this Test for Echo cluster. So I'm going to say Modify Cluster. You can see all of the configuration options that were set when this cluster was created. I'm going to scroll all the way down to this Backup and Restore area. Now you notice we don't have a backup restore prefix or a backup configuration, and that's okay. You can actually create a cluster inside of Mission Control of HCD, DSE, or Apache Cassandra without a backup and restore configuration. So I'm going to give this a prefix of T4E, just to kind of denote the cluster that it belongs to. And then I'm going to select my Aaron's Backups backup configuration. And that's it. Now I don't need to change anything else, and I'm just going to go and say Modify Cluster. Now do note that modifying the backup configuration for a cluster will cause it to do a rolling restart to ensure that the changes are applied. So with my cluster update complete, I'm going to click on the Backup tab. In the Backup tab, you can see that I now have access to this Create Backup button here, which is activated once your cluster has a backup configuration. So I'll click on this button, and the only option other than scheduling it for now or later is that I can pick the data center, which, well, there is only one for this cluster, so I'll just pick that, and I'll say Create Backup. All right, you can see that the backup job is now in a state of pending and will start momentarily. Oh, and just like that, you can see that our backup job has indeed completed with a status of success. So we actually do have a backup here now that we could utilize if we had to. So if I check my e-commerce product table, you can see that I have 65 rows out here. But let's say that, we have a little accident and a command gets run, and we'll say truncate table product. Now when I run my count, well, now there's 0 rows in it. Well, that's not good. So let's go ahead and restore our backup to retrieve our data. To do this, I'm simply going to stay on the Backup tab. I'm going to go down to my stored backup here, and I'm going to click on the 3 dots here and say Restore Backup. And it reminds me that this is going to wipe all data in the target data center and restore from the selected backup. Data center will be inaccessible during the restore, and I will say Restore. So you'll get a message above indicating that the restore process was successfully kicked off. Then you can go to the Activities tab. Inside the Activities tab, you can see that the restore process is indeed running. Once complete, the restore process is then marked as success. So let's verify this. Let's use our e-commerce key space, and then let's check the products table. And we have 65 rows, just like we should. For more information, head on out to datastax.com/products/Hyper-Converged Database HCD. Here, you can find all you need to know about HCD, including documentation and downloads. Thank you, and have a great day.